So, you're ambitious. You have big dreams. You want to be successful and, in the end, live the life you always imagined. But there's a problem. You're lazy. You know exactly what you should be doing, but you don't do it. This leads to feelings of guilt because, deep down, you know you're capable of more. This guilt builds up over days, weeks, months, until it turns into acceptance. And then the new year arrives, and with it, the same goals you had last year. You start off strong, full of motivation and a bit of delusion, but before you realize it, procrastination sneaks in. Like that relative who always shows up uninvited. Your procrastination turns into a daily cycle of laziness, and before you know it, you label yourself as a lazy person. So how do we break this cycle and free ourselves from procrastination? Well, there are many videos on the internet, but most of them only address the symptoms, like deleting social media or removing distractions. Although that can help in the short term, they fail to address the real issue, the root cause behind procrastination, which can be summed up in one word: inertia. In physics, inertia is the tendency of objects at rest to stay at rest and objects in motion to stay in motion unless acted upon by an external force. This also happens to be Newton's first law of motion, and it applies to tasks just as much as it does to objects. Starting any task requires an initial push and a certain amount of energy to overcome the state of rest created by inertia. And that's exactly where the problem lies. We make that initial push so big and so difficult in our minds that instead we avoid the task entirely and distract ourselves with cheap dopamine activities. So to break procrastination, we need to break inertia. And there are two ways to do that. Method 1, lower your expectations. Starting is the hardest part, so make it as easy as possible by lowering your expectations and taking the smallest step possible. For example, if you tell yourself, I need to sit down and write my 5,000-word essay, the inertia is too strong because the expectations are too high. But instead, if you tell yourself, I'm just going to write 50 words, the sense of inertia is much smaller because now it's very easy to start without relying on willpower or discipline. Method 2, the 2-minute rule. Another popular technique is the 2-minute rule. If you're not in the mood to work, just tell yourself you'll do it for 2 minutes and then stop if you want. For example, you're not in the mood to clean your room. But on a song, clean your room and stop when the song ends. The best part is, it's usually you'll keep going for more than 2 minutes or end up writing more than 50 words, and this happens because objects in motion stay in motion, which means that once we start, we begin to build momentum, and that momentum keeps us going longer. At first, it's like pushing a ball uphill, but once you get past the point of inertia, it's all downhill from there. And that's why it's important for the initial push to be small and easy. In other words, lower your expectations and start with just 2 minutes. You can apply these two methods to any area of your life to overcome procrastination, whether it's going to the gym, working on a side project, maintaining your relationships, or practically anything you can imagine. As Martin Luther King once said, you don't need to see the whole staircase, just take the first step.